Hello, welcome to my channel. In today's video I will be showing you how to do this gingham scarf using a simple weaving technique. In order for us to do our weaving, we need to have a base mesh stitch. In my last video I did a tutorial on how to crochet a filet mesh stitch. We will be using that same stitch as our base for us to do our weaving. So here I have the mesh stitch. Again, I have a tutorial for this stitch in my last video. You can go and check that link in the description below if you are interested in learning this stitch as well. For the yarn, I used the standard size 4-ply acrylic yarn, the softer kind. Of course, if you're living in a hot region, you have to use a cotton yarn, but I didn't have that, so I went for acrylic yarn instead. For my foundation chain, I chained 32 chains, and for my first row I worked 31 single crochet stitches in total in the color gray. That is for the width of the scarf, and for the length of the scarf I worked a total of 75 rows. I used 3 different colored yarns for this project. The first was a light to medium gray color, the second is olive green, and the third color I used was a bright yellow color. I will show you how to change to a different color, and then after that I will show you the basics of how the weaving is done. Here I have my last row of single crochet stitches in the color green, and I want to change to the color gray because that is the color that I started with. So I'm going to insert my hook into the top of that last double crochet stitch, yarn over and pull a loop through. I have 2 loops on my hook. I'm gonna get my gray yarn and place it over my hook, and I'm gonna pull that loop through the 2 loops on my hook. Now I'm just going to tie the 2 loose ends together before I start working my stitches. Now I'm going to turn my work. And into the top of the first stitch I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over and pull a loop through and make a single crochet stitch. Now I'm going to do a single crochet double on top of that same stitch. So I'm going to insert my hook into the first bar of that single crochet stitch, yarn over and pull a loop through. I've got 2 loops on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through both loops, and that will act as my first double crochet stitch. Now I'm going to chain 1 and skip the next stitch, and into the next stitch I will work a double crochet stitch, and I will continue repeating this pattern until I reach the end. Okay, here I've completed 4 rows of the gray color. The first row was the double crochet, a chain 1 and double crochet. In the second row was a row of single crochet stitches, no chains in between, followed by a double crochet, chain 1 and a double crochet, and I finished it off with a row of single crochet stitches. For the weaving part, we need to measure out the length of our scarf, and we want to make sure that we leave an extra 10 to 12 inches on either sides for our tassels. I cut out a total of 10 strands for each of my rows. Now you may need to cut out more or less depending on the type of yarn that you use. You want to make sure that once you start weaving in those strands, it flows freely and easily through each of the spaces. So just test it out first and see which one works best for you. You don't want to have too much of it that it bulges out and you have these big lumps of yarn sticking out, and you also don't want to have too less of it that you have big gaping holes in the middle of your stitch. So just test them out first, and then once you are satisfied with the way that it looks, then you can go ahead and work with that. For the first row, I'm going to be using the color gray, and I'm just going to come in from the back using my crochet hook to guide the strands through that first space right there. Okay, I'm going to insert my hook into that very first space, and I'll pull my yarn, my strands through that space. Here we are only working down the first column. I'm inserting my hook into the next space from the back coming up, and I'm grabbing those strands with my hook and pulling them through to the back. If you've done weaving before, then this would make sense for you. Here I'm just trying to explain it in a way that my beginners can also understand. You can also use your fingers instead of the crochet hook to do the weaving. I find this to be the easiest and fastest method. So here you can see I'm using my fingers to weave in the strands, going back and forth into each of those spaces. This is going to take up quite a bit of time to complete, so you're really going to need a lot of patience to get this done, and trust me, once you're done weaving in all the ends, you will love the final results. Okay, my first column is done. Now I'm going to start with the second one. I've also got 10 strands of yarn here. Now I'm going to insert it through that next space from the top down. I'm going to use my crochet hook to pull those strands through, and after that I'll just use my fingers to do the rest of the weaving. So here we are doing the opposite of what we did in the first column. In the first column we inserted our strands from the bottom up, and for this second column we are inserting our strands from the top going down. Once I've got all those strands through, I'm going to use my fingers, my thumb and my pointer to weave in back and forth until I get to the end of the scarf. Once I get to the end of the scarf, this is how it's going to look like. Again, we are doing the opposite of what we did in the first column. For the last chain space, I'm weaving the strands back upward in the opposite direction of what I did in the first column. You can also start stretching them out at this point if you want your work to be nice and flat, but we'll also do that after we've completed weaving in all the strands. Okay, so I'm done with my color gray. Now I'm going to move on to my next color, which is the olive green. Again, we are working in the opposite direction from the previous column. So this time we will be inserting our strands from the back, coming up through the chain space. Once you've got your strands in, you can start weaving into each chain one spaces. Okay, after weaving in all the ends, this is what I ended up with. I also went ahead and tied knots at the end to form these fringes, and I will show you how to do that shortly. I'm at the other end of my scarf. Now, before making any knots, I will have to tug on each strand just to make sure that it's nice and flat and I don't have any loops popping out in each of the spaces. Now that I've got my first section straightened out, I'm going to pick up those 10 strands, and where I have the single crochet in between the 2 double crochet stitches, I will insert my hook into that stitch from the bottom coming upward. That way it would be easier to pull those strands through that stitch. Now I'm going to yarn over, twist and pull all those strands into that stitch to form a loop. And here I'm just trying to get all those strands into that loop, so there is no right or wrong way of doing this. Just find a method that works for you and go with that. For the strands that are facing the bottom side of the scarf, you're gonna have to insert your hook from the top going down. So again, I'm inserting my hook into that very center stitch between the 2 double crochet stitches. I'm picking up those 10 strands. I've already straightened it out, and now I'm going to yarn over, twist and pull all those strands into that stitch to form a loop. You may have to use a bigger size crochet hook to pick up all those strands. Now I'm going to yarn over the strands with my hook, twist, turn and pull it through that loop. Sometimes the other strands can get caught up in that knot, so make sure to get it out of the way before you tighten that knot. Okay, I'm just going to go section by section, making knots on all those fringes, and when I get back we'll cut off all the excess yarn. I've just finished tying all the knots for my fringes. Now I'm going to measure out the length that I want for my fringe, and then I'm going to cut off the excess strands. Before cutting out those strands, I'm going to stretch them out first and have them nice and straight. Now I'm going to measure up to 3 inches, which is the length that I want for my fringe, and I'm going to get my scissors and cut off the excess yarn. I'm going to go section by section using the first cut as my guide. After trimming out all the ends, this is what my scarf looks like now. You can use this same idea to make blankets or couch covers or even pillow covers as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you've watched all the way to the end of this tutorial, thank you so much. Don't forget to leave a like and share this video with others. Okay, I'll see you in the next one. Happy stitching!